After 6 years on mouse and keyboard, I finally switched back to controller. And within the first week of the change, this happened.
Why do you
Don't worry, guys. That's right, after the previous 8 months of not dropping a single nuke on mouse and keyboard, in my first week on controller, as a matter of fact, it was like 2 or 3 days, I dropped a nuke. Well, join me as I break down the ongoing argument of controller versus mouse and keyboard in Call of Duty and Warzone. I'll include the facts to back each side up, as well as my personal discovery along the way. And we'll even dive into the Black Ops 6 aim assist nerf as well. I feel as though I have a fairly valid opinion on the subject since I grew up my entire childhood and adolescence on controller, then switched to mouse and key for 6 entire years, and just recently am back to controller again. I began my mouse and keyboard journey in 2018 where a little game called was running rampant. I bought a PC knowing this was the optimal experience for learning the game, and alongside that I learned the mouse and keyboard and naturally used it for every game to come after. Hell, I was even playing GTA on mouse and keyboard for whatever reason. Anyways, as the CODs evolved and WARZONE was brought into the mix, I stayed loyal to the Master Race's native input. However, just last month I attended COD Champs, and that's where I had an epiphany. Literally every single player was using a controller. As a matter of fact, there has never been a COD Pro that's used mouse and key ever. And on top of that, at the World Series of Warzone last year, not even 10 people used mouse and keyboard of the 150 players that qualified. Now, I knew this going into the event, this isn't some type of like recent discovery, but it got me thinking, is it really that much better? Now, I'm no pro, but you and I would be lying to ourselves if we didn't want to be the best player possible for our respective talent. So I realized that if I wanted to not only get better, level the playing field, but in turn have the most fun possible, I needed to give this controller thing a shot. So when I got home from Allen, Texas, that was the first thing that I did. That's where I discovered the first and probably the biggest advantage that controller has to offer. During my M&K Warzone career, there was often times where I would get slammed, watch the kill cam, and find myself saying,
"What? Controller player? That is a controller player!"
That's because of the noticeable aim assist. Now, let me get one thing straight before I go any further. If you're a mouse and keyboard player complaining about somebody using a controller and you get slammed by it, that's nobody's fault but your own. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from learning the opposite input, and it's readily available as long as you own the hardware. No one is making you play on a mouse and keyboard. If you want to argue whether controller players and mouse and keyboard players should be in the same lobby, that's an argument for a different day, and I do understand that to an extent. But at the same time, crossplay is like one of the best things that's ever happened in video games, so everyone can play with everyone. Maybe not at a competitive standpoint, but for a social standpoint, hands down. Anyway, since the mouse and key players have their entire arm and or wrist to work with, it only makes sense that since a controller player only has a single thumb to do all the aiming, they get a little help along the way with aim assist. Now, since it had been 6 years since I last wielded a controller, that aim assist was a forgotten tool that changed my world. The stickiness, the simplicity, the hacks, whatever you want to call it, this is the sole reason that the pros are all using controller. Immediately, right off the bat, it was most noticeable in the close range encounters. No coincidence that this is also where mouse and keyboard players have their biggest disadvantage. Basically, once you start hitting your shots, you're pretty much not going to stop hitting them until your opponent makes their way behind some cover or breaks your camera. More on that later. On top of this, the rotational aim assist gives you that buff that is something I honestly saw as a myth before I started this whole controller journey. Well, turns out it is very much so real and just does your aiming for you. The mid-range is basically the same thing, but moving into long range and more specifically sniping, this is where I'll give mouse and key players some props. Sniping a controller to me isn't bad by any means, but coming from mouse and keyboard, that precision and entire arm for aim is undeniably a better advantage. Not to say that sniping a controller is bad, but trust me, there are a lot of controller snipers that can run circles around mouse and key snipers, but the mouse players are capable of what we call flicks. This is rapidly changing your arm and crosshair placement so fast, which no controller is capable of doing. Now, I know what you're thinking. All you have to do is crank up your controller sense, which yes, will help significantly. However, this is where aim assist becomes disadvantageous to the player. Since we already established the stickiness of aim assist existing, that means when you don't want to be aiming at a certain player or switch to a different target, there's going to be some resistance which takes some getting used to, and sometimes it feels a little clunky and inconsistent as well. While I've already gotten used to it, there is still a delay because of aim assist that mouse and keyboard players simply don't have. Sum things up, in Warzone, aim assist gives you the power to effortlessly push a building or a multiplayer, maybe hold a hard point, and dominate these short-range encounters, whereas the mouse and keyboard players would have to sweat and absolutely dial in to achieve the same result. However, in the Black Ops 6 beta, we've seen a pretty noticeable nerf to aim assist overall. It's not nearly as sticky and not so forgiving when it comes comes to overcorrection. This could maybe give the mouse and keyboard players some life, but with more time, I'm sure we'll reach a better understanding of what to expect in that regard. However, even in the beta, I still think you're definitely better off with controller. I think Warzone would be much more affected by this change, because where there's going to be a little bit more long-range encounters, the aim assist really comes into play there. And since we already established that mouse and keyboards have the advantage when it comes to that, it could be more advantageous to be on mouse and keyboard. But like I said, I think it is way too early to really have an opinion. This is all just speculation. On to the next and probably the second most important advantage that a controller has, being the Now, right off the bat, to look left, right, up, or down, in theory, you can do on an unlimited plane by simply holding the joystick in your desired direction. Whereas with the mouse, you're limited to your desk space, which can often run out of runway. With this, you can't always turn the way you want as fast as you'd like because you'll have to reset your mouse's position by lifting it up and putting it back in the center. Now, back to controller, where you have one of the most seamless experiences imaginable, giving you yet another advantage when it comes to close range. I want to make it clear that outside of the unlimited motion with the joysticks, there is not a movement exploit that's achievable on controller that isn't on mouse and key. It's simply the way you do it, and the joysticks play a huge factor. Anyways, I think this feeds into why most trick shotters are on controller, because that infinite rotation with one consistent motion with a consistent speed just makes things way easier. Since you can turn at that constant speed, you're able to make very smooth movement with no hiccups in between. And unlike aim assist in Black Ops 6, I think omni movement is favorable to controller since you once again get that unlimited plane of movement that goes for any direction. However, as an X mouse and keyboard player, the ability to dive and slide with two different buttons is a massive advantage and a big quality of life change to mouse and keyboard. I know the hybrid movement kind of lets you do this, but not in the same way that a mouse and keyboard does. That's something that I'm still kind of getting used to with the Black Ops 6 beta. Also, I tried using mouse and key on Black Ops 6 beta, and let me tell you, it is just like really hard. Maybe it's not. I think it's just much easier on controller. I think the whole omnidirectional movement system was absolutely 100% designed to be played on a controller. However, it's only been a couple of days as of me recording this, so that's again subject to change and all just speculation. So please let me know what your thoughts are. So maybe you're wondering how I made the change and how I got so comfortable so fast. Well, for starters, it's not like I was learning a brand new game. It's just learning the same exact game with all that same game sense, just executing it very differently. I don't want to turn this video into a tips and tricks video, more so like my personal experience. But if you learn a thing or two on the way, that's great. As far as how I would recommend making the switch, you definitely cannot just grind Warzone and expect to get better overnight. I tried it and it just did not end well. Hey, you know what? I'm gonna do something crazy. I'm gonna play this next game on controller.
Bro, it's better aim with
Bro.
I did not want to have that gun out. Thinking I could get better, dropping into Rebirth like nothing changed was a total mistake. You without a doubt need to play multiplayer. The reason for that being is you will get way more reps in such a short time, which will result in exponential growth in your skill gap. That being said, what I did was just grind multiplayer non-stop. I think I actually went like nearly a full week without even loading up Warzone. Then when I finally did, it was still kind of a disaster. Warzone just plays way different. Most notably, navigating your inventory is an absolute pain in the ass. Well, it's really not, but when compared to mouse and keyboard, which I feel like mouse and keyboard like just dominates the whole like inventory management when it comes to any game. Whereas on controller, you have to cycle through each and every item before you get to the item you actually want to be like dropping or switching out. Again, it's not like it's bad. You can get used to it. I'm already getting used to it, but it is just a very different experience, I'll say. Now that I have a good understanding of how aim assist works and my movement was somewhat clean, I'm at the point where I just want to improve my raw aim. I don't want to act like I invented this next routine whatsoever, but loading up into a private match with bots, cranking up the HP to 300, and deleting your aim assist puts you at one of the most uncomfortable situations you can possibly be in Call of Duty. Now this is where things start to really accelerate. Using my raw aim taught me not always to rely on aim assist because it won't always be there.
Yeah.
Oh no, aim assist, I guess I'll go myself. Oh yeah, I'll go myself. Game sucks.
So now that I've covered the pros and cons of each, should you switch? Well, for me personally, if you're a mouse and keyboard player and feel stagnant in your skill level like I did, definitely give controller a shot. It's gonna suck at first, like you're really just not gonna want to stick with it, especially if you like don't play controller on any other game. but it is going to be worth it in the long run. Although my skill level may be somewhat the same as of my mouse and keyboard skill right now, mind you, it's not even 2 months for me, but with more time, I think I will easily surpass my top talent on mouse and keyboard, and that's solely because Call of Duty is just now designed for controller. Just listen to what mouse and keyboard legend Shroud had to say about mouse and key on Call of Duty today.
What made you fall away from Warzone? It's just COD, brother. I'm not a fan of the point and click. COD just needs a little bit more depth for me to really enjoy it, you know? And by that I mean like depth when shooting gun. Like that game, dude, that game is a monstrosity. It's a plague for mouse and keyboard. It's by definition a terrible shooting game for mouse and keyboard. When you shoot in that game, your screen is covered with bullshit. You can't even see what you're shooting at. And you know what that means? You can't play on mouse and keyboard. Because every time you try to take a fight, you're going to have visual clutter and all this bullshit on your screen, and you're not going to see anything. And guess what? The guy you're facing, he doesn't have to see anything because aim assist is doing the rest for him. And that's why I don't play Call of Duty.
This is a truth that I did not want to swallow for the longest time, but when I finally did, was totally liberated. I don't want to paint either input in a negative light because trust me, there are plenty of Warzone mouse and keyboard players that can run circles around some of the greatest controller players. Huskers, Metaphor, Symphony, Breadman, Tim the Tap... Well, maybe not Tim, but the rest are absolute demons and hold their own in the Warzone competitive scene. However, let me make this abundantly clear. These are the top 0.01% of players. And on top of that, I guarantee each of them can tell you a time where they've died simply because their opponent had a controller.
That guy killed you too. No way. No way. He's so bad. We attacked him. Watch this guy. Watch this guy. He killed me twice.
It's aiming for him! Dude, a controller player! That is a controller player!
It may not be nearly at the caliber as someone like me who was playing on mouse and keyboard, but still, I guarantee it happens to them. At the end of the day, the statistics speak for themselves. CDL pros, all on controller. Warzone pros, mostly on controller. And that is no coincidence. Once again, if you enjoy mouse and keyboard and don't mind a disadvantage, or maybe you're just absolutely cracked, then stick with it. There's without a doubt an objective advantage that controller players have and probably will always have when it comes to Call of Duty and Warzone. I say probably because there could be a shakeup with this whole Black Ops 6 aim assist nerf, but only time will tell. I wouldn't mind to see like a little bit more competitiveness between mouse and keyboard and controller players, because right now it is completely one-sided. But let me know what you think. What input do you use? Do you think either one is broken, or do you think they should change aim assist to like level the playing field? Do you plan on switching it up anytime soon? I would genuinely love to know all your opinions down below. If you want to hear me talk about the entire history of pay to win, pay to lose, or meta attachments, or rank every Warzone map, click on screen now. Join my Discord if you're feeling crazy. Help change this statistic, and if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, and thank you so much for watching.